You know, in the long, unbroken story of the world's oldest continuous civilization, there are these moments. Moments of profound, dramatic change. Eras of incredible glory, followed by periods of decay, and then a rebirth. And today, we are standing at just such a moment.
Now, that isn't just a dramatic headline. No, that's the serious assessment of strategists and economists who are watching a monumental shift take place. The economic engine that literally remade a nation and reshaped the entire global order, well, it's slowing down.
And that right there, that is probably the single most important geopolitical question of our time. To even begin to answer it, we have to look past the headlines, past the immediate crisis, and really understand the deep historical foundations of China's power and its resilience.
So, before we can talk about the cracks that are starting to show, we first have to understand the bedrock. You see, China's system is built on this really unique blend of ancient historical patterns and modern authoritarian control, and that gives it a kind of resilience that, honestly, often surprises the outside world. When you look at a timeline like this, you see something truly remarkable, something that really sets China apart. I mean, think about it. Great empires like Rome or Persia, they rose, they fractured, and then they vanished. But China's story? It's an almost unbroken cultural and political thread. From that very first unification under the Qin dynasty, all the way through the golden age of the Tang, this core idea of a single, continuous civilization just persisted for millennia. That deep-rooted identity, that sense of itself, is a source of immense strength, even today.
And right at the heart of this long, long history is this powerful idea, the mandate of heaven. Now, this was not just a blank check for a ruler to do whatever they wanted. Not at all. It was more like a moral contract. The ruler had to deliver stability and prosperity for the people. If they failed, they lost the mandate, and the people had the right to overthrow them. This created this cyclical view of history, a pattern of rise, decay, and replacement that is still embedded deep in the Chinese political psyche.
And you can see a modern echo of that ancient centralized rule right here. In China, it's not that the state has a ruling party. The party is the state. It's crucial to understand this. As you can see, every single organ of power, the government, the military, the courts, it's all subordinate to the party. The entire system is designed for absolute control, leaving absolutely no room for any competing centers of authority.
So, that unshakable system we just talked about, it oversaw an economic transformation that is, frankly, unlike anything in human history. But that miracle came at a cost. It left behind these deep structural imbalances that are now finally coming due.
The sheer scale of this change is just staggering. I mean, look, for decades after the reform and opening up started back in '78, growth was pretty slow. But then, after joining the World Trade Organization in 2001, the economy just took off. It was explosive, exponential growth that lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. But it begs the question, how on earth was this miracle financed?
Well, it was financed with this, a mountain of debt. We're talking about a total national debt that is now over 300% of the country's GDP. To put that in perspective, that's 3 times the value of everything the country produces in an entire year. This colossal amount of credit was pumped into building infrastructure and, most critically, into real estate. And that model, well, it has now reached its absolute limit.
So here's the crucial point, and if you take one thing away, let it be this. China isn't just facing a simple economic downturn. What's happening is it's confronting 3 deep structural crises that are all hitting at the exact same time, and each one is making the others worse. It's a perfect storm.
And these are the 3 forces that are going to define China's future. You have a population that's in an irreversible decline, an economic model that has completely run out of road, and a newly hostile international environment. Let's break down each one.
First up, the people. The one-child policy, which was enforced for more than 3 decades, was, well, it was brutally effective, but its success has created a kind of demographic echo, a wave that's now crashing down and acting as a permanent brake on the nation's potential.
Just try to wrap your head around this number, 1.15. That is the estimated number of children born per woman in China. That is catastrophically below the 2.1 that you need just to keep the population stable. It means the workforce is now shrinking and the society is getting older at a speed that no other country in history has ever experienced. It's the classic demographic trap, getting old before you get rich.
Second, the economy. That state-led, investment-driven model that built all those gleaming cities and high-speed rail lines, it's exhausted. It's hit a wall. The returns you get on new investment have plummeted, and it's left a legacy of ghost cities and just monumental debt.
And this chart right here, this is the heart of the problem. You see, to get around official borrowing limits, local governments created thousands of these off-balance sheet financing vehicles. A bit of an accounting trick, really. But now, with the property market collapsing, their main source of revenue is gone, and all this hidden debt poses a massive systemic risk that's basically paralyzing the entire economy.
And third, the world itself has changed. That whole era of friendly, benign globalization that allowed China to plug into the world economy and just soar, well, that era is definitively over. It's been replaced by an era of intense strategic competition.
So you have the US waging what is essentially a tech war, trying to contain China's rise in critical sectors like semiconductors. At the same time, the European Union is pursuing a policy of de-risking to make sure they're not too dependent on Chinese supply chains. And Beijing's response to all this external pressure? It's to turn inward, to pursue a strategy of self-sufficiency, to build a fortress China economy that can withstand that pressure.
All right, so given this triad of immense challenges, this perfect storm, the big question is, what happens next? The future isn't set in stone, of course, but the path forward seems to be branching into three very distinct possibilities.
Okay, scenario A. We can call this the Japanization trap. This is the path of policy paralysis. The leadership, fearing instability, avoids making painful but necessary reforms. This leads to what Japan experienced: lost decades of low growth, rising social pressure, and a country that grows old before it ever becomes truly rich.
Then there's scenario B. This is where that fortress China strategy we talked about actually succeeds. Beijing manages to build a self-sufficient tech ecosystem and solidifies a non-Western bloc of nations around it. Now, this doesn't lead to high growth, but it does lead to a new kind of Cold War, a bipolar world basically split into two deeply distrustful and competing spheres of influence.
And finally, there's the third path. Now, this one is by far the most difficult, but it might also be the most stable in the long run. Let's call it the Great Readjustment. Here, a near-miss crisis actually forces a new generation of leaders to make those painful reforms, shifting the economy away from just building stuff and towards domestic consumption. Growth is slower for sure, but the future is far more sustainable and balanced.
So there you have it: stagnation, fragmentation, or reform. The choices made in Beijing over these next few years will not only determine the fate of 1.4 billion people, they will define the geopolitical landscape for the rest of our century. The path is still unwritten,